clash of ideas, the John Stuart Mill view that if ideas clash, the truth will eventually
Yeah.
emerge. And so when they took it down, I decided I should resign, and Steve and Richard independently decided to resign. And so we did. And I just discovered yesterday there were 18 of us on this honorary board of the organization, chosen because of our accomplishments in keeping church and state separate. That three of us resigned, me, Richard, and Steve, and the FFRF decided, okay, we're going to get rid of the rest of them, which I thought was a pretty crazy thing to do because it eliminates the meritorious aspect of their sponsorship. But 15 other people bit the dust yesterday.
Extraordinary.
Presume, yeah, I mean, I just couldn't believe that really took me for a loop. I think they did it. I don't know what their psychology is, so that this kind of thing could not happen again, that you would not get pushback from intellectuals and scientists,
I
that
mean,
they
it's
could prevent
completely
that.
preposterous, isn't it? I mean, the whole point of being an intellectual or a scientist or a professor is you push back on stuff, right? You challenge,
Yes.
you challenge conventional norm, and you ask questions.
Yeah, I was told later that we weren't supposed to do anything on this board, but I felt that my purview was not to constantly intervene in the organization's doings, but when they went off the rails, I would try to slightly correct them and put them back on the track again. But when I tried to do it, it just blew up in my face. And unfortunately, I had to resign. I didn't want to. I still think, and I should emphasize this, that the Freedom from Religion Foundation is a good organization that in the main does very good things, because after all, the First Amendment to the American Constitution is to keep church and state separate. And that's what they do. That's their main thing, and to educate the public about this kind of thing. But when they start getting into woke ideology, that's when they start jumping the rails. And this elimination of the honorary board seems to me to be typical of wokeness.
Yeah.
Because when merit clashes with ideology, in wokeness, it's always the merit that gets discarded.
Yes.
This is why, for example, in America, the SATs and ACTs, indices of how you did in high school, have been eliminated in many schools as criteria for getting into college, because it's merit that conflicted with ideology, which is to create equity in colleges.
You said you've had a lot of hate and stuff. Have you had death threats as well?
Yes. More or less. I was told, I don't know if I can use this word in your show. I'll try. I think it's fair.
You can.
I was told that I should fillet a shotgun. I put a shotgun in my mouth and fire it. And I have other such emails. That's not really a death threat, but it's a warning that the guy didn't like what I said and I should kill myself.
Unbelievable. What?
And I get called transphobe on a daily basis, merely for saying that the rights of trans people and the rights of cis people are going to come into conflict sometimes, and they have to be adjudicated. Merely saying that is enough to get you deemed as someone who hates trans people, and indeed who wants trans people eliminated from the planet, which is the farthest thing from my mind.
Yeah. It's been great to talk to you, Professor. Thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure.
Well, here to debate what we've just been listening to and whether gender ideology has a future, the Executive Director from the progressive organisation Rebellion Pact, Brianna Wu, the trans rights activist Eli Erlick, and the host of Tomi Lahren is Fearless on Outkick, Tomi Lahren. Welcome to all of you. Eli, we heard it pretty well there from the professor, that from a biological point of view, never mind anything else, from a straight scientific biological point of view, a man cannot be a woman. What is your response to that?
He is completely unscientific and so bound up in his ideology that he isn't even paying attention to the vast majority of biologists, including those from the American Academy of Sciences, who disagree with him and do acknowledge that sex describes a variety of different characteristics that can be changed.
Do you not accept, there's a reason, for example, that we separate the sexes at the Olympics. It's because there is a presumption based on reality, fact, data, that biological men are superior in almost every physical way imaginable. They're more powerful, they're faster, they're stronger, they have greater lung capacity, and that if you didn't separate the sexes, if you took this to its logical extension, where biological men who become trans women start to just compete in the Olympics all in a free-for-all, a gender-neutral Olympics, then biological women would simply never win a medal again.
There has never been a trans woman who has won a gold in the Olympics.
Oh, well, actually, hang on. We literally just had at the Paris Olympics the Algerian boxer, welterweight
She's
division.
not a trans woman.
I'm about to tell you what
For all that we know, she is intersex. She was assigned female at birth.
All we know is she was banned from the World Championships the year before because she reportedly tested positive for male chromosomes. Now,
again, this does not mean she's a trans woman.
Why doesn't she just take a simple sex test and show us?
We can't speculate about someone's
Actually, we
chromosomes.
can. We can when they win gold medals, because you just said it's never happened. When a woman, or says she's a woman, wins a gold medal in a women's sport, and when one of the female competitors who competed against her in an earlier round said she had to quit after 40 seconds because she'd never been hit that hard, damn right we can ask some difficult questions, even if it tramples on a few little oversensitive feelings. It is ridiculous. There was no sex test done.
Said she supports Amin Khalifa's right to participate.
Why didn't she have a sex test to clear this up?
Again, I can't speculate about someone's gender.
But would you not support having sex tests? It's the easiest way to determine somebody's sex. You give them a test.
I think, like Neil deGrasse Tyson said, that we should have different levels of competition.
How? Explain to me how that would work.
There are different metrics, and this would depend sport by sport. Most sports now do allow trans women to compete. I also do want to correct something, too, that there have been several trans men who have won in male competitions at the global level.
What were the competitions?
This includes everything from rugby to swimming.
Rugby? You think there's a trans man who's beaten all the men at rugby?
I'm not saying that a trans man is the best person in the world, the best rugby player in the world, but there are plenty of trans men who have competed at the global level.
Yeah,
this is very easy to
there
Google.
Aren't plenty. There are very, very few. And what they don't do is they don't win because they're physically inferior. Tomi Lahren, I mean...
again...
OK, let me bring in Tomi. We've got two other panelists. Tomi, look, to me, it's a simple question of biology, as we heard from the professor. And when I hear, with all due respect to Eli, and I absolutely respect your right to have your opinion, but I just think it's flying in the face of basic fact.
It is. And, Piers, I wonder, is it going to take a female athlete being seriously injured or even killed for people to understand how serious this is? It has nothing to do with transphobia and bringing up trans men or biological women who are competing against men because they are trans men, whatever the terminology is for all of that. You don't see the outrage at that because, as you mentioned, Piers, they're not winning. They're not crushing the competition. And if they have, it's in very, very few cases that are negligible. What you're seeing also, you're not seeing the outrage about that because it's very few cases, I haven't heard of any, where trans men, biological women who are transitioning to men, want to be in men's locker rooms, that want to make men feel uncomfortable while they're changing, being in their changing space, watching them undress. So it's a completely different situation. And when you ignore not only biology, but when you ignore gender itself, why should biological women, and I don't even like saying that, Piers, I don't like even referring to myself as a biological woman. I'm a woman, okay? I was born that way. I don't like having to preface that with what I am biologically. I'm a woman. Why should me and other women like me have to put up with competing against men or having men in our locker rooms, men in our restroom, because it makes a very, very small segment of the population feel better about themselves? Why do their feelings trump the feelings of women? That's what I don't understand in this argument, in this debate.
No, I don't. And Brianna, as the professor said, he's had death threats. People wanting him dead simply because, as a biologist, he spells out the bleeding obvious factual reality of this. And as he points out, he's not remotely transphobic, nor am I. I want trans people to have exactly the same rights to fairness, equality and safety that I enjoy. I've always said that.
How is it
And
equality if we don't have the same
Hold
access?
on, Eli.
Well, hang on. I'll come back
Let me
to you,
go.
Eli.
Let me
I'll
go.
answer that question, but let Brianna answer. But here's the point. It doesn't make you transphobic if you actually don't want to see women's rights eroded in the process.
Of course it doesn't, Pierce. This is the whole problem. The Eli and her trans fringe freak show friends are threatening anyone that disagrees with them. I, as a trans woman, have dealt with their death threats constantly since just standing up and trying to say, we've got to have some common sense conversations about this. There's nothing he said in that interview that's remotely transphobic.
No.
And the thing is, he is in the middle. Pierce. He is in the middle. And what is happening with this brain dead progressive fringe movement is they are taking Democrats that would be on our side, that want to have trans rights protected. They are turning it into the enemy, and they are destroying these organizations so they can't stand against the Republicans that want to take away everything here. They are annihilating our defenses. And Eli, I really want to know, this is my direct question for you. When does this brilliant progressive plan you have for trans rights, when does this curve kick in and we start winning elections again? Because my generation had this for years, and it was progress that you enjoyed when you had your stuff paid for. When do all your brilliant ideas kick in and we start winning elections again? Because you're destroying our entire movement. You're doing things like giving hormones to children. You're giving hormones to children online. You put together a network for this. You lied about it in the aftermath. When did your ideas start working, Eli?
Eli?
We heard this exact same rhetoric during the civil rights movement, the gay rights movement.
What is the point? When do they start working?
Progress takes time. You know this, and we've talked before. It does take time, and we can't cut into the rights of anyone. Trying to throw anyone under the bus means that we erode all rights. And we've seen this already with the Supreme Court knocking down certain transgender rights. Next comes abortion, then comes cisgender women's rights, then comes free speech. We've seen it over and over again. We've seen it with the civil rights movement. We've seen it with the gay rights movement of the 1960s to 80s. There's going to be this period of demonization.
That's your answer. Just keep waiting with these brain dead tactics. They're losing elections. Trump is back in office with your playbook, Eli. Your playbook. You put Trump back in office.
Kamala wouldn't even say the word transgender. I really don't think that's very progressive.
No, but you know what she did do? You know what she did do?
That ad is
hang on, Brianna. I mean, what Kamala Harris did do, she and President Biden both supported having trans women in women's sport. And that was part of the most successful political ad in recent memory. As I said to the professor, when you had an ad that ended up, Kamala's for they, them, Donald Trump's for you. That was deemed to be the most effective ad in modern political American history.
That's
right?
correct.
At some point, Eli, you've got to look at yourself and think, wow, our campaign isn't working. Telling people that it's okay for biological men to come into women's sport and be massively more successful as women than they ever were as men, which is what happens in almost every single case. That is not fair. It's not equal. It's not right. It's cheating. And if you don't think it is, and you try and pretend it isn't, eventually, as we saw, most Americans wake up and go, bullshit. I'm going to vote for Trump even if I don't like him, because he'll stop this madness. And I simply say to you, I want all trans people to have fairness, equality, and safety. Why would you jeopardize all that at the altar of such obviously unfair, unequal, unsafe bullshit? Genuinely.
If you actually look at the polls, the most popular, the most important electoral issue for people, it wasn't trans people. That was about 1%.
I didn't say it was, but I did say
economy.
the advert I talked about was the most successful in modern times. The New York Times, a liberal progressive newspaper, concluded it may have moved the needle by 3 points. Right? That was the damage.
The New York Times
is not
Kamala
Harris's
or
pro-trans bullshit
on
had
trans
caused.
issues.
She can't answer, Pierce. She can't answer. She will not defend these brain dead tactics. Pierce, I don't want to go compete against Tomi in sports. I want to go have lunch uptown with her and talk about normal stuff.
Right.
That's why I transitioned to just have a normal life. Eli is out there pushing this narrative that science doesn't matter, that sex doesn't matter, that we can just roll into every space. She claims to be a feminist, but she doesn't want to make any common sense compromises with the women she says she's speaks for.
Yeah,
It is brain
and
dead,
we
it
see,
is
as we saw,
failing, it is
right, and
making
as we saw
people
with J.K.
hate.
Rowling, and we saw with the professor, and we see with everyone. I've had it. When you poke your head over this, Tommy, and you say this stuff, the trans lobby, let's just use the collective phrase. I'm not saying they're all like this by any means, and I'm not even going to you, Eli, but the abuse, the threats, the viciousness, the calls to be cancelled, the targeting of your employment, of your bosses, and so on. It's so insidious. And to me, it's so self-harming to the cause. I know people who are trans, who are very quiet, want to get on with their lives. They don't want all this nonsense. They don't want the trans lobby trying to pretend it's fine for trans women to be in women's sport, because they know everybody laughs at it and makes them a laughingstock. They just want to lead their lives like the rest of us. And I wish they could without being dragged into this crap.
Yeah, and Piers, look no further than the way that Caitlyn Jenner is treated by the left and by many in the LGBTQ rainbow mafia, as I call them. That is that far left fringe part of the LGBTQ movement that is seemingly louder than the rest of the movement, and that's really unfortunate. But I'll tell you, Piers, what I think a lot of this comes down to. I think that there are a lot of activists and a lot of activist organizations out there that make a lot of money on this issue. And if it were not for this controversy, if it were not for them continuing to encroach on women's rights and women's sports and women's spaces, they wouldn't have a job title. They wouldn't have a crusade. They wouldn't be able to fundraise. So whereas many people are completely fine with LGBTQ, they support it, people living their lives, I'm one of those people. Once you start pushing people too far, you're going to get the backlash. But I don't think these activists mind the backlash. In fact, I think they thrive off of it, and I think they make their paychecks off of it because they love it. They love keeping this at the center of controversy. That's the only way a lot of these organizations can exist. That's the only way a lot of these nonprofits can exist. And that's the only way that some of these people can take huge salaries pretending to be and cosplaying to be advocates for the LGBTQ community. And it's really a shame.
And Tommy, what did you make of Mark Zuckerberg, his extraordinary statement on all previous Facebook, Instagram policies about including the gender issue? He said, we do allow now allegations of mental illness or abnormality when based on gender or sexual orientation, given political and religious discourse about transgenderism and homosexuality and common non-serious usage of words like weird. These are revised company guidelines. Do you feel completely comfortable with that? I mean, do you think we should be encouraging people to say that all trans people are mentally ill or they're weird or whatever? Or do you think that slightly crosses a line of being fair and equal to them?
Well, listen, free speech is saying what you want to say. It's also hearing what you don't want to hear. There's plenty on these so-called free speech platforms that I don't like to see. I don't like to see transgenderism pushed on children, but unfortunately, that's been in existence on Meta platforms and on TikTok for several years now. It's unfortunate. So I think you need to open up the other side of the conversation. I'm not all the way optimistic that Meta is actually going to do that. I mean, anytime we talk about even equality for women in women's sports and them being able to compete at a high level with other women, you're censored on Meta platforms. I know because I work for Outkick that talks about this issue a lot and is at the forefront of the issue. So I'm cautiously optimistic. But listen, I don't agree with bullying people, calling people mentally ill or weird. I don't personally do that. I don't like it. However, if you're going to have a platform that talks about both sides of the issue, you have to let the other side be able to speak as well. I'm hopeful that we can see that.
Yeah, and Eli, you know, if you're getting professors who are not remotely transphobic, like my last guest, getting told to shoot themselves dead, fillet a gun in their mouths, as he put it, you know, what right does the other side have to then say, well, you can't use mean words like weird about us? Genuinely.
Well, that's a huge generalization, Piers. I don't support anyone encouraging abuse or harm to anyone. And most trans people don't either. Like Brianna said, there is a very reactionary fringe who may engage in these very harmful behaviors and rhetoric. This doesn't represent all trans people. And surprisingly, I also find myself agreeing with Tommy that no, we should not have bullying on these platforms. And this means also not calling trans people weird. This new policy actually infringes on free speech because personally, when I don't when I'm called mentally ill or weird, I stop engaging. And that obstructs my ability and willingness to speak. So what this policy is doing is discouraging queer and trans people, along with migrants who are also included in this policy, from speaking on their own behalf.
Yeah, I mean, I would say to that the behavior of the extremists in the trans community has been a massive problem. When someone like J.K. Rowling tried to have a reasonable debate about this and just got utterly bombarded with death threats. And the whole turf stuff and everything, all of it is ridiculous. It's all got to stop. We've got to calm everybody down and have a genuinely reasoned and sensible and calm debate about the reality, which is more and more trans women are now trying to compete in women's sport, for example, and that involves them using women's spaces and so on. Is that right and proper and fair, or does it erode women's rights? And if, as I would conclude, it erodes women's rights, what's the answer? So that trans women can still compete in sport, but in a way that doesn't trample other people's rights. That's all I want. Brianna, last word to you on this. I mean, the new meta guidelines, I think they're long overdue just generally in the sense that so much stuff was getting censored that actually you couldn't say anything about anyone without someone somewhere trying to get you cancelled and often being thrown off social media. So do you welcome them broadly, or what do you feel about it?
Piers, this is the fundamental problem, is when Eli and her fringe trans friends make all this stuff and they try to deny reality. They try to deny the reality. I'm a natal male that transitioned to live as a woman. Most people call me she, her as I go about my day. That's fine. That's all I need. I don't need someone to have some existential belief that I'm a woman. I need them to let me have control over my own body and go get health care. What she has done and her playbook does is it elevates all these issues to like hidden knowledge. And they try to shut normal people up when they have questions about trans women in sports, or they have questions about calling themselves pregnant people. Like, it is just imposition after imposition. And we try to shut people up for so long, eventually they're just going to explode. And this is 100% what we're seeing on Facebook in the American system right now. We've got to stop trying to win debates by silencing them, and we need to come back with some facts. And Piers, here's a fact. There was a 2018 study that came out that showed that Eli and I both have protein receptors in how we process testosterone. This could be a reason about why we turned out the way that we did. We don't have to deny the reality of sex to admit that there's probably some sort of biological thing that's going on with both of us that makes us behave the way we do.
Right, and look,
feel the way that we do. So let's have an honest discussion about that.
I agree. And look, the bottom line is, if I'm transphobic, then why are 2/3 of this panel trans?
Right.
Eli? Last time I checked, Tommy, you're not trans.
Representation doesn't have anything to do with ideology.
You know what?
There's a lot of work to do in our community, and all progress gets some pushback, to answer Brianna.
Yeah, look, it's a good debate.
It's not an answer. It's not a serious answer. You're